one of the most prestigious art shows in the world is about to get a Manitoban touch. The Canada Council for the Arts announced that 21 fellows have been selected for la Biennale di Venezia, the annual art exhibition that sees artists from around the world in a variety of disciplines showcasing works from their own countries. Of those 21 fellows, only one is from Manitoba. Multimedia visual artist, beadworker, and relational maker Claire Johnston. Claire joins us live in the Classic 107 studios. Good morning and congratulations. This is so exciting. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Nolan.
So I got to ask, what was your reaction when you found out that you're in La Biennale?
Yeah, I just cried. Yeah, it was really overwhelming. It wasn't I applied. I knew it was very prestigious. I was hopeful, but I wasn't expecting the outcome. So I was just overwhelmed and had tears in my eyes. I was very touched when I found out.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine. For those who might not be familiar with your work, how would you describe the artistic output and the practice that you're bringing to Venice?
So I'm really inspired by my family. I'm inspired by Métis women beadworkers, and particularly from the mid 19th century. We were really prolific in creating beadwork here in Winnipeg and Red River. So I'm very inspired by the legacy here in this place that was created by Métis women, and then also by my own family growing up with my father creating, me creating alongside him, knowing these beautiful objects in our home that were made by my ancestors. Woodwork was a common one in our family to have. So those are some of the things that I'll be bringing with me. I'll be thinking about Métis women of the past and their stories, and also be thinking quite a lot about my family.
Yeah, I can only imagine also what your family's reaction must have been when they found out that you would be going to La Biennale. Was that like a moment of, can't believe that the work from my family, from my ancestors gets to be on this world stage? Is that something that you're thinking about in that moment as you've got those tears in your eyes as you're contemplating, wow, my gosh, this is it, I'm in?
Yeah, that it's just that. It's knowing that, just my own family. I'm paternally Métis through my dad's family, and just knowing what a brilliant artist he is, that my aunts are, and my grandfather, and really with being quite brilliant without any real education or schooling for it. But so I always thought, my dad creates so beautifully, but is never really acknowledged in the way that I feel that his artistry and brilliance should be. And same with my grandfather. I just think that they're incredible, and but haven't had that acknowledgement or recognition. I think that they should have. And same goes with Métis women in beadwork here. We've been absolutely prolific in our in material culture here, and that was almost entirely erased. But there's now this renaissance of young people and old people bringing these traditions back to the forefront, and so it's a beautiful thing to be able to bring that to such a large place, and also a place that is connected to our beadwork that produced our beads. So
I love the image of a renaissance in Métis beadwork, especially when it relates to something that we colloquially associate with a renaissance, a place like Venice. I love the connections between there. We've touched a bit on the kinds of works that you produce. What sorts of things will you be showcasing specifically, do you think, as you contemplate journeying to Venice later this year?
Yeah, so while I'm in Venice, I'll be doing research, and then I will be working at Canada House in Venice. So there will be an exhibition that will be taking place during the duration of the Biennale. So it will be us fellows, 3 per month, that will be giving tours of the exhibition while we're there, and then also doing our own independent research. So I won't necessarily be producing works to be shown while I'm in Venice, but certainly the research that I'll be doing there will inform further creation in the future.
What sorts of things are you hoping to research while you're there?
So, we have these. I spend a lot of time in the collections at the Manitoba Museum and other museums across Manitoba, across the homeland and beyond. There's Métis beadwork all around the world, in museums, private collections, and only a little bit of it has been accessible for us to still see and study. So I spend quite a lot of time with those old pieces. They're my biggest teachers. And through that beadwork, I grew up with a father that's always dreaming, creating, building. My dad's always got a dream, and he talks quite a lot about taking things from different applications and applying them to different things. So, my dad's an arborist, but he just does a whole sort of things and sort of draws from different areas. And so I'm inspired by that way of thinking. And so with our beadwork, it's not something like a painting that there, it can be a print and, sold a bunch of times. It's a one-off. You spend a tremendous amount of hours and it's just that one piece.
Yeah.
So I love woodwork, and growing up, I've always heard my dad talking about CNC technology as it relates to woodwork. So computerized numerical control. So it's basic. What a CNC machine does is a bit like the opposite of a 3D printer. So it's taking away from a material rather than adding. And so thinking about this, I thought about our beadwork and just different applications of our beadwork, a different experience of it. And I had this vision of beadwork in wood and in large scale. So imagine a big slab of wood on a wall, and coming out of that wood is beadwork that has been milled with a CNC machine to take that space out and create all of the beads individually. Wow. And so this is a dream that I've had for a little while here that I've been working towards. And so I'd love to see large scale, I guess almost like a sculpture on the wall of our beadwork in wood and in stone. Yeah. And so that's a vision that I have that is a large one. I don't have all of the pieces yet. And so to be able to go to the Biennale and be surrounded by folks that are in this world of architecture and art and, pushing boundaries, having different applications. And so, when I think about our material culture as it relates to beadwork, often, pieces are quite small. Sometimes, they're larger, a window valance or piano valance. But I just think it would be such a beautiful statement to have in large scale and also in places that are public and visible that acknowledge Métis women of this place and what our contributions have been. So that will be, in terms of like my artwork and architecture, that's something that I'm going to be very interested in visiting the different exhibitions at the Biennale and connecting with other artists. But the research, really, the reason I'm going there is to get closer to these stories that we have about our beadwork and closer to these relational stories that we have associated with our beadwork. So what I'm curious about, with my beadwork, I do 2-needle flat stitch Métis beadwork. And I love using the antique Venetian beads to bead with. Also antique French beads, but and Venice being the ones that invented these precious little glass seed beads. I wish to know what Venetian artisans at the peak of Métis beadwork here, what did they know about Métis women who were creating with their beads here? Did they know who we were? If they did, what did they know about us and understand about the people here who were using their beads?
Yeah.
And then the opposite to that, what did Métis women, what did our Métis grandmothers know about these beads and where they came from, and how they understood that relationship between the two of them across the Atlantic Ocean. So those are the stories that I'm hoping to find, and that will be through hopefully visiting with some intergenerational Venetian families that have participated in creating these beads intergenerationally.
Yeah.
And so to be able to share with them, young people like myself, we're looking back to using these precious old beads that aren't produced in this way anymore. And that, again, there's this renaissance here right now, and that, that we're thinking about those relationships and, during colonization here and when we weren't able to practice our beadwork anymore as we were, and what that effect was in Italy, for example. So those are the stories that I'm interested in gathering, and I've started some of that work on my own, studying what my ancestors bought at Lower Fort Garry right now is something that I'm researching to see what kinds of beads they bought, what the beads were called. So I'm engaging in some of that work before I go.
There's so much to pull from all of that, as you are pulling so many different connections and relations in your work, even as you say, before you go, thinking about those Venetian beads. What were the relationships like as Métis women were engaging in beadwork at around the same time? There's so many relational aspects to all of this. And we mentioned in the intro that you're also a relational maker, a concept that we've dived a little bit into here on the show. We've heard a couple of different people talk about that, but maybe for those who have not heard of that sort of concept before, what is relational making and how does it apply to, you've talked about this a little bit, but how does this apply to your process?
Yeah. So it's this is a word I use to describe myself, relational maker. And it's really been Casey Adams and her talking about her work that resonates so much. And, she's encouraged other Indigenous artists to use this term if it fits for them. It certainly does in my case. The reason I create, it's I need to create. And I create because I grew up creating with my dad, and my dad grew up creating with his dad. And so those, I work very intricately with my hands. And when I was little, I would watch my dad's hands as he was making, and I would think, like, oh, I just want to move my hands like my dad does. And so I grew up watching a lot, asking a lot of questions, and the way that that I've learned to make is through question and answer and through relationship, and that's like relationship with the land. So I've my dad was an arborist when I was a kid growing up, and so had a very close connection to the land, knowing what the trees were, doing woodwork. My dad explaining to me the different parts of a tree, the cell layers. So I think when I think about being a relational maker, it's sort of opposite to this Western idea of as an artist, you're just a single individual, and that you somehow have an original idea or that exists in a vacuum. And I think relational making goes beyond that. I don't think that that's a reality. I am the accumulation of the gifts my ancestors gave to me, the relationships that I have around myself generally as I exist right now. And so, so I resonate quite strongly with this idea of making being it's a relationship. It's a relationship to yourself and and what's around you and to your past. Yeah.
The pieces that you produce are products of you and all of those that have come before you and your pieces, not so much something that is to be produced for production's sake in the same way that we might think about it in a more westernized sort of a context. What do you hope audiences in Venice take away from your work as they engage with it in whatever form that looks like?
Yeah. I think that I will be proud to go there and be able to affirm that we as Red River Métis, that we as Métis people, we have always created brilliant artworks for our nation, for our families, for those we're in relationship with. We always have. We are still here. We still remember. We are still brilliant, and we are creating, and we deserve to be in places like this. I think that a lot of, I think in Europe in particular, there still exists, this idea that Indigenous peoples, we don't exist, and that the traditions that we do have are far gone and long from the past, and that just is not true. Our traditions, we have contemporary applications of our traditions. We have very traditional ways we practice our traditions. They are not gone, and they are alive, and they are flourishing. And so that's what I wish to show when I'm there, how beautiful we are as a people, and what we still have so much to contribute to the world. Yeah.
On the flip side of that coin, maybe you're giving something to La Biennale and to the people who are coming to see La Biennale. What do you think you're going to be bringing back to your artistic practice from this experience? Obviously, it's a little bit early to forecast that, but from a pure inspiration, knowing the reputation of La Biennale, what do you think that you'll be able to bring back from this experience?
Yeah, I think in my family, I don't. There's no professional. I don't have a professional artist that I can. A lot of Indigenous artists, we don't have people in our family that we can reach out to in terms of going to fine art school or how to advance yourself as an artist generally. There's a lot of gaps and barriers that exist. So I know that what I'm engaging in, it's a tremendous opportunity. And so I'm hoping actually to be able to share some of those skills and the capacity building for other artists in how to apply to something like this, how to, what that pathway looks like. Because a lot of those pathways still need to be forged much stronger. There's two Indigenous artists that are part of the Biennale this year, and I think it would just be wonderful to, maybe one year there's a quarter of the participants are Indigenous artists. I just think that would be wonderful. The other portion is I will be visiting seed bead factories while I'm abroad, and I wish to bring home some of that really up-close knowledge about how beads are produced and be able to share that with community here. Wow. As well as hopefully pick up some Venetian beads too, so that I can create with when I'm back home.
To very much incorporate into your practice in a very literal way.
Yeah.
In maybe a less sort of literal way, how do you think this experience will influence your relational making, or how you go about forging those relationships in your life that then in turn influence the art that you then create?
Yeah. I'm autistic, so I think the way that I think about things, I love to understand every single tiny detail about something and the way that it's connected to all other things. So in my mind, I often it's easy for me to see all of the connections.
Yeah.
I might not always be able to make all of them as in depth as I wish to, but the opportunity to learn such intricacies about the materials that we're working with, that to me is like an even more embodied way to create when I have that full understanding of the ways that the materials that I'm working with were made. So one of those is, in addition to the beads, but it's also, I work with smoked tan moose hide. So when I'm working with that hide, I know who made that hide and I know how many hours they put into making it. And so when I'm creating that piece of beadwork, I'm thinking about who made that hide. And that's part of my intention as I'm beading. So having that even stronger and closer connection to how these seed beads were made, that will be just another beautiful way that I can have that deeper connection to the way that I create. I don't know what it'll look like yet or what I'll feel like, when I'm back, but I certainly think it'll be great inspiration to me and
incredibly exciting to contemplate too. Claire, this is so exciting. Thank you so much for joining us in the Classic 107 studios to tell us more about it.
Thanks, Nolan.